Christopher Langston stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city lights twinkle 40 stories below. At 45, he commanded an empire worth billions. Langston Enterprises dominated the skyline, and the headlines called him one of the most eligible bachelors in the country. Yet tonight, something felt hollow about his glass and steel kingdom. Mr. Langston, Barbara knocked softly on his door. She'd been his assistant for 15 years, the only person who truly knew him. Your dinner reservation at LeBlanc is in an hour. The board members are already en route. Chris straightened his Italian silk tie and grabbed his jacket. Another night, another business dinner. This was his life now. Endless meetings, deals, and the relentless pursuit of more. He told himself he liked it this way. Thank you, Barbara. You can head home now. He smiled at the woman who'd watched him transform from an idealistic young man into this corporate machine. Barbara hesitated at the door. There's one more thing, sir. A letter came today from Carter and Associates law firm. Chris froze. Carter, name he'd buried deep, a name that belonged to a different life. His heart raced as memories threatened to surface. Just put it on my desk, he said, forcing casualness into his voice. After Barbara left, Chris stared at the unopened envelope. He didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Jasmine Carter, his ex-wife, the woman he'd loved more than life itself until his ambition devoured everything in its path. Memories flooded back, their tiny apartment when they were newlyweds, Jasmine's infectious laugh, the way she brought him coffee in bed every morning, then the fights that started small but grew monstrous, until that final day when she walked out, tears streaming down her face. I can't compete with your need for success, Chris, she'd said. You've chosen your empire over us. Not now, he muttered, shoving the letter into his drawer. Important people were waiting. LeBlanc buzzed with the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over perfectly arranged tables, where deals worth millions were discussed over wine that cost more than most people's cars. Chris sat at the head of his usual table, laughing at unfunny jokes and making small talk with people whose names he'd forget by morning. And then I told him the stock wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. Harold, one of his board members, delivered his punchline to dutiful laughter. That's when Chris saw her, 3 tables away, still breathtakingly beautiful. Jasmine's dark hair was shorter now, framing her face in a way that made her look both older and somehow timeless. But it wasn't her that made his blood run cold. It was the children. 3 children, about 5 years old, gathered around her table like stars orbiting the sun. 2 girls with matching pigtails, and a boy with unruly dark hair. They had Jasmine's smile, but something about them, the boy's eyes. The way one girl tilted her head struck him with terrifying familiarity. Mr. Langston, are you all right? Harold's concerned voice seemed to come from very far away. Chris couldn't breathe. Math had never been his strong suit, but he could count. 5 years old? The divorce was 6 years ago. Jasmine had left, and he'd been too proud, too stubborn to fight for her. Had she been ... Excuse me, he said, standing so quickly his chair nearly toppled. I need some air. But instead of heading for the exit, his feet carried him toward Jasmine's table. She was laughing at something one of the girls had said when she looked up and saw him. The laughter died instantly, replaced by something between fear and resignation. Chris, his name on her lips was soft, careful, neither angry nor happy. The children looked up curiously. The boy had his eyes. Exactly his eyes. Are they? He couldn't finish the sentence. Jasmine's face hardened with protective determination. They're mine, Mommy. Who's that? One of the girls asked, her voice carrying Jasmine's musical tone. Just someone Mummy used to know, sweetheart, a long time ago. But Jasmine's eyes never left Chris's face, and in them he saw the truth that made his world spin off its axis. We need to talk. He managed to say no, we don't. Her voice shook. Slightly. You made your choice a long time ago, Chris. You chose your empire over everything else. Over me. Over us. Us. The word was barely a whisper. They're mine, Jasmine repeated firmly. But her defiance couldn't hide the pain she still carried. Chris lowered his voice, acutely aware of curious glances from nearby tables. Are they mine too? Before Jasmine could answer, she closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. I tried to tell you when I found out I was pregnant. I called your office dozens of times, wrote letters. You'd changed your number. Your assistant, not Barbara, the one before her, said you were too busy. After a while, I got the message. You didn't want to be found. The words hit him like a physical blow. He remembered those months after Jasmine left, how he'd thrown himself into work, changed his number, hired a new assistant, anything to avoid dealing with the pain of losing her. I didn't know, he whispered. Would it have made a difference? Jasmine asked, and for a moment, all her defenses fell away, revealing the woman who'd once believed in them. Would you have chosen differently? Before he could answer, one of the girls tugged at Jasmine's sleeve. Mommy, can we have dessert now? You promised. Jasmine's face softened as she looked at her daughter, their daughter. Of course, sweetie. Why don't you 3 look at the dessert menu and pick something special? The children eagerly grabbed the menus, giving Chris his first real look at them. The boy had Jasmine's dark hair, but his father's strong jaw. The girls were identical twins, perfect blends of both parents. What are their names? He asked quietly. Jasmine hesitated, then sighed. Mia and Sophie are the girls. The boy is James. James' father's name. Had she done that on purpose? They're beautiful, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, they are. And they're happy. We're happy. Jasmine, please, we need to talk about this. Talk. She studied him for a long moment, then pulled out a business card. My office number. Call tomorrow. Not for US, that ship has sailed, but for them if you're serious, if you're ready to be there for someone besides yourself. Chris took the card with trembling fingers. Chris barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces as children. The word felt foreign in his thoughts. Asterisk, yet somehow right. He had 3 children he'd never known about. 5 years of their lives he'd missed. The next morning he arrived at his office before dawn. Barbara was already there with his coffee, efficient as always. Barbara, he said, his voice grave, I need you to tell me the truth. 5 years ago, did Jasmine try to contact me? Barbara's face changed. She set down the coffee cup slowly. Yes, sir. Many times. And what happened to those messages? Miss Reynolds, your assistant at the time, said you'd given strict instructions not to be disturbed by your ex-wife. She returned all the letters and blocked the calls. Chris sank into his chair. Why didn't you tell me when you took over? Barbara hesitated. By then. It had been months. I assumed. I assumed you knew what you were doing. You never mentioned her name, not once in all these years. Chris pulled out Jasmine's business card, already worn from handling. Get Miss Reynolds on the phone. I want every letter, every message Jasmine sent. Everything, sir. That was 5 years ago. Miss Reynolds probably didn't keep. Find them, Chris interrupted, whatever it takes. And clear my schedule for the afternoon? At exactly 1 p.m.? Chris stood outside Jasmine's office building. Carter and Associates was modest compared to his gleaming corporate headquarters, but it had character, just like her. Jasmine looked up from her desk as he entered, reading glasses perched on her nose, surrounded by case files. She'd been expecting him. You came, she said simply. Did you think I wouldn't? Honestly, I didn't know. The Chris I knew would have moved heaven and earth to be here, but the Chris you became, she shrugged. I wasn't sure. I found out about Miss Reynolds, about the letters and calls. Does that make a difference? It makes all the difference. His voice rose. Then he forced himself to calm down. Jasmine, if I had known you were pregnant, you would have what? Thrown money at the situation? Added us to your busy schedule between board meetings? That's not fair enough. Tell me something, Chris. Yesterday at the restaurant, that was a business dinner, wasn't it? Some important deal you couldn't miss. He nodded slowly. And how many of those dinners do you have in a week? The truth of her words stung. She was right. Even before she'd left, he'd been pulling away, choosing work over their marriage, success over love. Tell me about them, he said softly. Please. Something in his voice reached her. She opened a drawer and pulled out a photo album. Mia is the oldest by 2 minutes, she said, showing him pictures. She's our artist, always creating something beautiful. Sophie is our little scientist. She wants to know how everything works. And James, she smiled. James is just like you were before. The money changed everything. Kind, thoughtful, always trying to make people laugh. Chris's throat tightened as he looked at photos of first steps, first words, first days of preschool. The moments he'd missed. They've asked about their father, Jasmine continued. I've never lied to them. I told them their daddy was someone I loved very much, but he had to go away. And now? Chris's voice was barely a whisper. Jasmine sighed. Now they're old enough to start asking harder questions. And honestly, I don't know what to tell them anymore. Tell them the truth. Tell them their father was a fool who lost his way, but he wants to make it right. It's not that simple, Chris. They have a life, a routine. They're happy. I'm not asking to disrupt their lives. I'm asking for a chance to know them, to be their father. And what happens when the next big deal comes along? When your empire needs you more than they do. Chris reached across the desk and took her hand. She didn't pull away. I was wrong, Jasmine, about everything. I thought success meant having the biggest company, the most money. But sitting in that restaurant last night, watching our children laugh, that was worth more than every deal I've ever made. Tears formed in Jasmine's eyes. I wanted to tell you so many times, even after they were born. But you'd made it so clear that your new life didn't have room for me. I couldn't bear to be rejected again. I'm sorry, he said, meaning it more than any words he'd ever spoken. I know those words aren't enough, but I am so sorry. His phone buzzed Barbara's name on the screen. Without hesitation, Chris turned it off completely. Jasmine noticed. Don't you need to get that? No, he said firmly. Nothing is more important than this conversation. She studied his face for a long moment. The children have a play at school next week. They're doing The 3 Little Pigs. Mia is the smart pig who builds with bricks. Would it be okay if I came? Third row, left side, Jasmine said quietly. That's where I always sit. It starts at 2 o'clock. Hope bloomed in Chris's chest for the first time since last night. I'll be there, Chris. Jasmine's voice stopped him as he stood to leave. If we do this, if we let you into their lives, you have to be sure. Sure, because if you disappear on them, like you did on me, I won't, he promised. I've spent the last 5 years chasing things that don't matter. I'm done running. The elementary school auditorium was packed with parents, all holding phones and cameras, ready to record their children's debut as farm animals. Chris sat nervously in the third row, left side, exactly where Jasmine had told him to be. He'd left 3 board meetings and $1 million deal to be here. For once, he didn't regret it. Jasmine arrived with Sophie and James, both in costume for their other roles. She noticed him immediately, but didn't seem surprised. He'd texted every day to confirm the time and place. Remember, she whispered, as she passed his row, they don't know who you are yet. We agreed to take this slow. Chris nodded. Today, he was just another face in the crowd, but his heart nearly burst when Mia came on stage in her brick-builder pig costume. She delivered her lines perfectly, wagging her finger at her siblings about the importance of building a strong house. After the play, Chris watched from a distance as parents congratulated their children. He wanted desperately to tell Mia how wonderful she'd been, to hug all 3 of them, but he'd promised Jasmine they'd do this right. Mr. Langston, a teacher approached him. I'm Mrs. Thompson, the children's teacher. Chris tensed. Does Jasmine know you're talking to me? The teacher smiled kindly. She told me you might be here. She also told me the situation. She paused. They're wonderful children. You should be proud. I am, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I just wish it's never too late to be a good father, Mrs. Thompson said gently. Just be patient. They're worth waiting for. Over the next few weeks, Chris learned what it meant to be patient. He started small, sending anonymous gifts to the school. New art supplies for Mia's class, a science kit for Sophie's after school, program and sports equipment for the playground where James loved to play. Jasmine knew who the gifts were from, of course. They were so excited about the new soccer balls, she told him during one of their weekly coffee meetings. These meetings had become sacred time, their chance to talk about the children, to plan the next steps. And the art supplies? He asked, eagerly. Mia hasn't put down those new colored pencils since they arrived. She's already filled half a sketchbook. Chris smiled, imagining his daughter creating. I'd love to see her artwork sometime. Jasmine hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Here, she said, showing him a photo. She drew this yesterday. It was a picture of 3 pigs, clearly inspired by the play, but they were wearing regular clothes and doing everyday things. One was painting, one was reading a book, and one was playing soccer. It's them, Chris realized. She drew herself, and her siblings. She's very observant, Jasmine said. All 3 of them are. They notice everything. Have they asked about me? About the man from the restaurant? Jasmine stirred her coffee slowly. Sophie asked if you were one of my clients. James said you looked familiar, like someone he'd seen in a dream. Chris's heart ached, and Jasmine smiled slightly. Mia said you had kind eyes. Tears threatened to spill from those kind eyes. When can I meet them? Meet them soon, Jasmine promised. But first, there's something else. She pulled out 3 folders, each with a child's name. Medical records, school reports, everything you should know if you're going to be in their lives. Sophie's allergies, James's fear of thunderstorms, Mia's asthma. Chris took the folders like they were made of gold. I'll memorize every word. There's more. Sophie has a science fair next month. James has soccer practice every Tuesday and Thursday. Mia has art classes on Wednesdays. Their world doesn't run on business hours. Chris, they need consistency. I'll rearrange everything, he said without hesitation. Barbara's already restructuring my schedule. I'm delegating more to my VP. SPF. You're bored. Won't they object to their CEO suddenly working half days? Chris's face hardened. Let them object. I've given that company everything for 15 years. It's time I gave something to my family instead. The word family hung between them, heavy with meaning. That Saturday morning arrived with dark clouds, threatening rain, but Chris didn't care about the weather. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night rehearsing what he would say to his children. His phone rang as he stood in his walk-in closet, facing an unexpected crisis. What does a father wear to meet his children for the first time? Christopher, darling, his mother's voice was sharp with disapproval. What's this I hear about you canceling the Morrison deal? Mother, I can't talk right now. I have somewhere important to be. More important than $100 million deal. The board is worried, Christopher. They're saying you've changed. Maybe I have, he said, finally selecting a simple blue sweater. And maybe that's not a bad thing. This is about her, isn't it? I saw you at LeBlanc with Jasmine. Chris froze. You were there. Those children tell me they're not yours. They are, Chris said firmly. You have 3 grandchildren, mother, triplets. Their names are Mia, Sophie, and James. The silence was deafening. Then, how dare she keep this from us? We'll sue for custody. We're Langstons, we have rights. No, Chris's voice was sharp. You will do no such thing. Jasmine raised them perfectly without us. If you want to be part of their lives, you'll respect how we choose to handle this. He hung up before she could respond. At the park, Chris arrived, early, watching other families enjoy their Saturday morning. A father teaching his daughter to ride a bike, A mother pushing her son on the swings, simple moments he'd missed. When Jasmine's car pulled up, his heart stopped. The children emerged in bright raincoats, purple for Mia, yellow for Sophie, blue for James. They ran toward the playground, their laughter carried on the wind. "Are you ready?" Jasmine asked when she reached him. "No," Chris admitted, "but I don't want to wait another minute." They walked together to the playground. The children were already playing James on the swings, the girls taking turns on the slide. "Kids," Jasmine called softly, "can you come here for a minute? There's someone I want you to meet." The triplets ran over, curious but not shy. Up close, Chris could see every detail: Sophie's freckle under her left eye, James's hair falling across his forehead, Mia's wise, observant eyes. "This is Mr. Langston," Jasmine began, then paused. "Christopher, and he's your father." The children stared at him. James's mouth fell open. Sophie grabbed her sister's hand. Mia just tilted her head, studying him. "You're our daddy?" James asked finally. Chris knelt to their level. "Yes, I am. And I know I haven't been here, and I'm so sorry about that, but I want to be here now, if you'll let me." "Where were you?" Sophie's voice was small but clear. Chris looked at Jasmine for help, but she shook her head slightly. They had agreed to be honest. "I was being foolish," he said. "I was so busy trying to be successful that I forgot what matters. Family matters. You matter." "Do you have other kids?" Mia asked. "No," Chris said softly. "Just you three. And you're more than enough. You're everything." Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Christopher." Eleanor Langston was striding across the park, Richard behind her, both overdressed and completely out of place. "Mother, don't," Chris warned, standing. "These are our grandchildren," Eleanor announced, looking at the triplets with a mixture of pride and calculation. "They should be at home with us, not in some public park." "Mrs. Langston," Jasmine said coolly, "this isn't the time or place." "Oh, it speaks," Eleanor sneered. "Tell me, dear, how much money did you think you'd get by hiding our grandchildren?" The triplets pressed closer to their mother, scared by the angry woman's tone. Chris stepped between his parents and his family. "You will not speak to Jasmine that way. She's been a wonderful mother. She protected them, loved them, gave them everything they needed while I was too blind to see what mattered." "Christopher, be reasonable," Richard tried. "Think of the scandal. We need to handle this privately. With lawyers, no." Chris turned to his children, who were watching with wide eyes. "I'm so sorry about this. This isn't how I wanted our first meeting to go, but I want you to know something. Your mother is the strongest, bravest person I know. Everything she's done for you." Mia stepped forward suddenly, her small hand slipping into Chris's. "Your eyes are sad," she said simply. That innocent observation, that trusting touch, broke something in Chris. Tears fell freely down his face. "I am sad," he admitted. "Sad that I missed so much. Sad that I'm only meeting you now, but also very, very happy that I get to meet you at all." Sophie and James moved closer, to curious rather than afraid. "Can we call you Daddy?" James asked suddenly. Chris looked at Jasmine, who nodded slightly. "I would love that," he said, his voice breaking, "but only if you want to. We can take it slow, get to know each other first." "I want to know everything," Sophie declared. "Do you like science?" "I love science, especially space." "And soccer," James added hopefully. "And drawing," Mia chimed in. Chris laughed through his tears. "I want to know everything about you, too. Everything you like, everything you don't like, all your favorite things." Eleanor and Richard stood awkwardly to the side, watching their son interact with his children for the first time. The anger seemed to drain from Eleanor's face, replaced by something softer. "They have your eyes," she said quietly to Chris. "Oh, 3 of them. They have a lot more than that," Jasmine said, speaking up. "They have his kindness, his creativity, his spirit, everything good about Chris before the business world changed him." She looked at Chris with something like hope. "And now, maybe they'll have their father too." The rain that had been threatening all morning finally began to fall, soft and gentle. But nobody moved. The Langston family, all 3 in the rain, watching as something broken began to heal, as something lost began to be found. It wasn't perfect. There would be more difficult conversations, more tears, more adjustments. But it was a start. And sometimes, a start is all you need. Private room at LeBlanc had been transformed. Gone were the stuffy business atmosphere and formal place settings. Instead, there were balloons, streamers, and 3 different cakes, one for each child's unique taste. "Happy birthday." The crowd cheered as the triplets blew out their candles. 6 years old. Chris could hardly believe it. "Make a wish," Jasmine encouraged. "But we already have everything we want," Sophie said matter-of-factly. Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Next to her, Richard beamed with pride. They had come so far from being the cold, business-focused grandparents they once were. Now, Eleanor spent every Tuesday baking with Mia, while Richard never missed one of James's soccer games. "Speech," Barbara called out. She had become like family over the past year. Chris stood, looking around the room. "A year ago, I sat in this restaurant thinking I had everything I needed. I had money, success, and power. But I was wrong. I had nothing because I didn't have what mattered." He looked at his children, Mia in her purple party dress, Sophie with telescope-shaped hair clips, James in his soccer jersey, despite the formal occasion. Then 3 little stars came into my life and showed me what true success looks like. It looks like Mia's breathing is getting stronger every day, like Sophie discovering a new constellation, like James scoring his first goal. He turned to Jasmine, and it looks like forgiveness, understanding, and second chances. Thank you for giving me the chance to be their father. Group hug, James declared, and suddenly Chris found himself surrounded by his children. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Chris found himself back at the same spot where he'd first seen his children a year ago. Jasmine joined him. Penny, for your thoughts, she asked. I was just thinking about that night, how scared I was when I realized they might be mine, and now I can't imagine my life without them. You've come a long way, she said softly. We all have. He looked at their children, now showing their grandparents a new game they'd invented. Thank you, Jasmine, for not giving up on me completely, for letting me be part of their lives, for showing me what matters. She touched his arm gently. You did the hard work yourself, Chris. You chose them. Every day, you choose them, and I always will, he promised. They all went outside to the restaurant's garden terrace as the sun set, painting the sky in beautiful colors. Look up, Chris told them, right on cue. Lights began to dance across the sky, not the real aurora borealis he'd promised them, but a beautiful light show he'd arranged, creating the illusion of dancing lights among the stars. It's magic, Mia whispered. Like our family, Sophie added. Better than winning any soccer game, James declared. Chris looked at his family, his children gazing at the lights, Jasmine smiling proudly, his parents holding hands like teenagers, Barbara taking pictures of everything. This was his real empire, his true success story. 1 year ago, he'd been a different man, measuring worth in dollars and deals. Now he measured it in hugs, bedtime stories, soccer games, science projects, and crayon drawings. Daddy, Mia tugged at his sleeve. Will you teach me to draw the lights? Of course, Princess. We can try tomorrow during your breathing treatment. Can we all draw together? Sophie asked. Even though I'm not good at art, James added. Especially because you're not good at art, Chris laughed. That's what families do, we try things together, even when we're not good at them. Later that night, Chris sat in his guest house looking at their birthday cards to him. Each one was different. Mia's was a beautiful drawing, Sophie's included scientific facts about birthdays around the world, and James's had a soccer ball, sticker, and slightly crooked letters. He placed them carefully in a special album he kept, not of business achievements or press clippings, but of real success. His children's artwork, school reports, and photographs of family moments. On the last page, he placed a new photo from tonight, all of them looking up at the lights, their faces full of wonder. Below it, he wrote, the real meaning of success, loving and being loved in return. Christopher Langston, once known as the ruthless businessman who had everything, now had something far more valuable. He had a family that proved second chances were possible, that love could heal old wounds, and that sometimes the best success stories weren't about what you gained, but about what you found when you weren't even looking. As he walked the path between his guest house and the main house, one last time that night, checking on his sleeping children, as he always did, he knew that this moment, this life, this love, was worth more than all the billions he'd ever made. He had finally found his true fortune, and it was worth every star in the sky.